Hi, I'm Laura,
And I'm Joe.
and this is CrimeDivers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to season 5.
Welcome back after our extended break.
Yes, we did take a bit longer than expected, didn't we?
We did. We were only meant to have a few weeks off, but
Well, a couple of weeks.
a couple of weeks off.
And that turned into a few weeks.
Yeah. But unfortunately, there was things that happened over that time that meant that we just couldn't do it. So
And that being COVID.
yes, unfortunately, I did end up with COVID.
Yeah, it was a funny story. Not so funny, but because COVID was involved. But there was one day I woke up and my niece, my six-year-old niece, Laura's daughter, had texted me and said that she had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I had texted Laura kind of saying, I'm not surprised at that because,
There'd been a lot of cases in our school.
yeah, there'd
in our
been
class.
some of her friends had got it. And Laura was like, I've got it as well. And I was like, oh, for God's sake.
Oh no.
So Laura and her daughter both had COVID. So then later on that afternoon, my daughter texted me and said, I've just tested positive for COVID. And I was like, really? And my daughter hadn't seen Laura or her daughter.
No.
So that was a coincidence.
Uh-huh.
And then later on that day, my husband John, he decided to take a test because he'd thought he had the cold, was coughing and whatnot. Took a test and he was positive.
And hadn't seen him either.
He hadn't seen our daughter, he hadn't seen Laura, he hadn't seen Laura's daughter. So Laura, her daughter, my husband, my daughter, all got COVID on the same day.
Yeah.
But yet none of them had been around each other. And then a couple of days later,
Our mum got COVID.
our mum got COVID, but there is a chance that she got that from Laura and her daughter because she had
Yes.
been around you.
Uh-huh.
Or she had been around other people as well, so it
Yeah.
might not have been you. But
I know.
yeah, she got it a couple of days later. So luckily everybody was okay. Laura got it the worst.
Yes, I definitely think I got it the worst. There was a couple of days where I felt really awful.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And my daughter was quite bad as well, but I don't think she was quite as bad as you.
Yeah.
John, he was fine. It was like he just had a bit of a cold. He was out building a shed outside and...
Oh, see,
Ew.
my daughter was living her best life.
Oh,
Like,
she had
was-
no symptoms.
no symptoms whatsoever. Was absolutely loving it. Loving the fact that I didn't have to isolate from me so that we could hang out when I felt better anyway.
Yeah, you were COVID. She was, me and Mummy are COVID buddies.
Yeah, basically. And just loving the fact she was off school for the week. So she was living her best life for that week, whereas I was just dying for half of it. At
Yeah.
least.
So while Laura was dying for it, our daughter was messaging me and saying, "Can we play the computer?" So we were playing a Lego game on the PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
Luckily that you'd bought for her, so we were doing that. So me and her were
I know, keep leaving me in peace.
leaving Laura in peace because her husband was like working from home, wasn't
Yeah.
he?
Uh-huh.
So
And he never got it.
no, he
You
never got
you
it.
never
I
got-
didn't get it, so I don't know
know.
how that happened, but
And I did have a few after effects because I got a cough afterwards.
Yeah.
And I felt a bit not great, but I'm feeling good now.
yeah, it's sort of all over and done. Everybody's fine now. But yeah, you did have a rough few days.
Yeah, definitely.
So Laura had the COVID and I was alright. I got a new kitchen.
Yeah, you got a new kitchen, so
Yeah, I was quite happy. I didn't get COVID.
No.
And I got a new kitchen, so obviously I had the upheaval of getting the new kitchen, and we're still not finished it yet. It still needs decorating.
I mean the units look lovely, but it needs
Yeah,
decoration.
it does. But it was just it was a good time to have a break, obviously with you not being well and
Yeah.
me getting my kitchen, so it was a good time. But and it was good for mental health and just have a bit of a break from true
Yeah, 'cause
crime.
we do think about a lot of true crimes.
We
so-
do. I mean, it's constant. I mean, because we're either recording, we're researching, we're just watching it or listening to it on other podcasts, and
Yeah,
so
it was good to have a break. And
yeah, our lives are filled a lot with true crime.
it is.
So I did listen to a few of my favourite podcasts, but I did not as much as what I usually do.
just
I did,
completely shut off from it all.
yeah.
I was like, no true crime for me.
But what I did notice, if anybody's interested in, Laura noticed one and I noticed the other, but Laura noticed there was if anybody remembers, we did an episode a while back called The Canoe Man. And there's actually like a TV show. I think it's like a dramatisation.
Yeah, like a mini sort of drama.
Yeah, of it. Did you notice what channel it was on?
Oh God, I think it was on I'd like to say ITV.
Right, well, I'm not sure, but it's called The Thief, the Canoe, and his wife.
Yeah.
So if anybody wanted to watch that, we haven't watched it, so we can't recommend it, but I was just thought...
It's on my planner. I'm going to watch it.
Both of us are going to watch it. And also, I noticed as well, in an episode that I did, the Bodies in the Garden, there's so I think it's 4 episodes. It's a mini-series as well, and it's called Landscapers.
Right.
And I think that's the same, it's like a dramatisation of that case as well. And that's on Sky Atlantic for the UK, and I think it said HBO for America.
Oh, right, okay.
I think.
Right. Okay.
Not too sure, but if you just search them and see if you can find them.
One
was called The Landscapers, and the other one's called The Canoe.
No, The Thief.
The Thief, The Canoe, and his wife.
Yeah.
So just if anybody was interested, and as I said, we're going to watch them, so hopefully they're good.
Yes.
So anyway, shall we just...
Well, one other thing you've got to talk about first before we talk about is the missing people.
Yeah, last season, we were doing the missing person of the week, but we decided to stop doing that just for the simple fact that the way that we record, it doesn't really work out too well because we record in advance. So we sort of like take a few weeks and we write a few episodes and then we record them all on the same day. So obviously we can record an episode and it might not go out for another 4 weeks. So
by that time the person's potentially been found.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, and it has actually happened a couple of times. There was one time I was, I think it was like the day before I was going to publish the episode and I realised that the person had been found safe and well. So obviously I had to sort of take that out of the episode and replace it with another one.
Yeah.
Sorry, and then there was another one that we'd actually published the episode, and it was a couple of days later on Twitter. I think I must have tweeted about it, and somebody actually said to me, "Oh, this person's been found safe and well." So it just doesn't make sense for us to do that because there is a good chance, if it's a more recent one especially, that the person could have been found. So what we're going to do is. We'll still share like on social media, we'll still try and help raise awareness on Twitter and Instagram, whatnot. That's the better way to do it for us.
Yeah.
So we're it's not that we don't care or we just can't be bothered doing it anymore. It just doesn't make sense for our pod to do that.
Exactly.
So
shall we actually...
Are we finished? Have we got everything out?
I know. People are like, come on, get on with it now.
I bet so many people have just skipped everything that we've just said. So summarise. No, I'm not joking.
No, we shall get into it. So, as always, where in the world are we?
We're in the USA.
Cool. And what is the title?
The dating site Stalker.
Okay. Well, shall we dive into our first episode?
Of course.
Of season 5?
Yes, let's dive in.
Let's go.
So to start with, we are in a place called Council Bluffs in Iowa. It's a Midwestern city with a small town feel. It's a friendly, quiet, rural, that's a hard word to say, rural community. And on the outskirts of the city, on the border near Nebraska, is Big Lake Park. This park is like huge. It's almost 200 acres and funnily enough there's lakes there. And there's like hiking trails, children's playgrounds, all that stuff. So on the 5th of December 2015, a woman was in Big Lake Park. She was just out for a wee walk, and after a while she sat on a bench for a rest. Another woman approached her from behind, told her to get down on the ground, and then shot her in the leg and ran off into the woods.
Oh, okay.
It was dark, so the woman said she didn't get a look at this other woman, and there was nobody around. There was no witnesses, so nobody saw what happened.
Yeah. So
she lay there until she thought it was safe, and then she managed to sort of get up and drag herself back to her car because she'd left her phone in the car, and she called 911. So straight away, police headed to the park in their cars and helicopters, and but the suspect was like nowhere to be seen.
Bit random, isn't it?
Okay. So remember, that was 2015. So now we're going to rewind back to 2012 when this case actually started.
Right, okay.
Right? So Dave Krouper was a 35-year-old mechanic who lived 10 minutes away from the park in Omaha, Nebraska. So even though he lived close by, he was actually in a different state.
Oh, right, okay.
Because they were at the border.
Yeah,
So this case is investigated by police. It was in 2 states.
Yeah.
So David recently split up with his long-term girlfriend, Amy. They'd been together for 12 years and they had 2 kids. He moved to a new appointment. Here we go. The break obviously didn't do me well. No, did it? I still can't speak.
No, can't speak, can't pronounce.
Right. He moved to a new apartment. He got a new job and he started his life as a newly single man. So he signed up to some online dating sites, and the first woman that he met was called Liz Gollier. And her full name is actually Shanna Elizabeth Gollier, but she goes by Liz.
Right, okay.
So she was single with 2 kids, and her kids were about the same age as Dave's kids, so they had something in common. And she owned her own business called Liz's Housekeeping. When Dave saw her profile picture, he was attracted to her straight away, so they set up a date. They met up at a coffee shop and they just sat, chatted, had a coffee, got on really well.
Yeah.
So Dave was up front with Liz straight away. He told her, I don't want any commitment, just out for a bit of fun, just want to meet different women. I'll be dating other people. That's, just, as I said, just a bit of fun, just casual.
At least he was up front, I suppose.
And she was the same. She was like, that's fine, that's kind of what I'm looking for as well. Everyone was all good. So he went on to date about 6 women at the same time, which I don't think I could cope with that. 6 people, that's a lot.
I know. No,
I'd be getting names mixed up. I would be so bad for that. I'd be calling them by the wrong name. Guaranteed.
No, I must admit, I wouldn't be like that.
I couldn't be bothered.
No, personally, not me.
I just, no. I don't have the energy.
Each to their own, no.
I don't have the energy for that. One's enough.
Maybe you would have a few years ago, maybe not now.
Yeah, not now. So he went on a date about 6 women at the same time, and he was up front with all of them, so that nobody was getting hurt. They all knew exactly what page he was on.
Well, at least that's something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're going to be like that, good for you, but just be honest with everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was just, as I said, he was just having fun. He hadn't been single in a long time because, as I said, he was with his ex for 12 years.
Yeah.
And he was just getting to know all these different women. And this went on for about 6 months. He was just enjoying himself, living his best life. Then one day at work, Dave was at work and he was at the front desk. And this really attractive woman walked in. Her name was Cari Farver. She had brought in her car, which was a Ford Explorer, as it needed some work done to it. So Cari was 37 and she had a 14-year-old son. She was a computer programmer at a big firm in Omaha. So Dave said when they looked at each other, there was an instant spark. And when they stood close to each other, he could even feel a tension, a sexual tension. Cari told one of her friends about meeting Dave, and she'd said, this guy is not my type at all, but there's just something there, there was just something about him.
Yeah.
So a few days later, Dave was on an online dating site, and he came across Cari's profile. So he messaged her and asked her out, and they went to a restaurant called Applebee's. And
I love Applebee's.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's an American place.
Well, yeah, I kind of gathered that because there was a TikTok that people kept singing about going to Applebee's or something.
I like Applebee's. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there's actually because I'm going to Florida this year, and
she booked a holiday as well.
Yeah, I booked a holiday as well. Sorry about that. And there's an Applebee's literally just 2 minutes up the road from me.
Is there? Well, I haven't. I don't think I went to Applebee's when I was in America. I don't remember it, so...
I don't know how long it's been around. It might not have been around then, to be fair.
Right, okay, thanks for making it sound really old.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they went to Applebee's and they got on really well. And when they got up to leave, he asked her if she wanted to go back to his house. So she said yes. They went back to his. So they kissed and things started to get a bit heavier, and Cari stopped and said, right, okay, if we're going to do this, meaning sex, that's all it is. You're not my boyfriend, I'm not your girlfriend. And he's like, yes.
That's exactly what I want.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. He said he felt like he'd hit the jackpot because this woman, he was so attracted to her, they got on so well, and she just wanted the same as him. It was just sex. Yeah. That was it, nothing else.
Fair enough.
So he was like, yes, let's go. So later on, when Cari was leaving, she actually walked right past Liz, the woman that we were talking about earlier, the first woman that I met. So Liz was coming to Dave's apartment to pick some things up, because obviously they'd been sort of seeing each other. Because as I said, for 6 months he'd been seeing all these different women. So that could have been a bit awkward. But
Yeah.
I don't think they actually said anything to each other. I think they just sort of like looked at each other and just,
Yeah.
hello, you know, and walked past. So Cari, she actually worked just round the corner from where Dave lived. But it was actually an hour's drive from where she lived.
Right, okay.
She had a big project coming up at work and she was working long hours. So Dave asked her if she wanted to stay at his house while she was doing this project, just to save her the 2-hour commute every day. Because it was only, you know, obviously it was only temporary. It was only like a few days or whatever. So they'd only known each other for 2 weeks, but they felt really comfortable with each other. So she was like, yeah, that would be great. You know, it's going to save me a lot of time.
Yeah.
So she agreed and she asked her mum if her son Max, because remember she's got a 14-year-old son.
That's right, yeah.
So she asked if Max could stay with her with his gran for a few days. So it's like, yeah, fine, no problem. So Cari, she grew up in a small town called Macedonia in Iowa. And she was very close to her mum Nancy and they talked every day. She had a lot of friends, she was really smart, she was good with numbers and computers. She fell pregnant at 22 and her relationship with her son's father didn't work out, so she became a single mum and she brought Max up by herself. She was a good mum, always put her son first and she just doted on him. By her late 20s, she started suffering with depression and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She saw therapists and was on medication, and by 2012, like, she was in a good place, because obviously this is where we are, 2012. She was in a good place. So she landed a good job as a computer programmer, and she was so excited because she was going to be able to provide better for her son. You know, obviously the money was better and everything. So just a little bit. That was just a little bit background about her. So remember, she's staying at Dave's for a few days.
Yeah.
So on the 13th of November 2012, Dave left for work at about 6:30 a.m. He gave Cari a kiss and just said, right, I'll see you later. But later that morning, he got a text from Cari saying, let's move in together. So obviously he was like really confused because for one, they'd only known each other a couple of weeks. And two, they'd already talked about what their relationship was and agreed that it was only casual. As I just told you, they weren't girlfriend and boyfriend. It was just sex. It was just casual.
Yeah.
So he was like, what the hell? Like, so he texts her back saying, no. Sorry, we haven't known each other long enough. Like, and he was nice about it. And she texts him back straight away saying, fine, I hate you. I'm dating someone else. I don't want to see you anymore.
Okay.
So Dave was like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
Because it just came out of nowhere. So he didn't hear anything for the rest of the day. And then the following day, his phone started blowing up with texts from Cari saying things like, I hate you, you've ruined my life, you're a terrible person. So Dave thought, well, you know what, I've dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
Obviously this woman is just, you know.
Crazy.
A bit crazy, yeah. So round about the same time that Cari had texted Dave about moving in together, she had also texted her mum Nancy, telling her that she was taking a job in Kansas, which totally surprised her, her mum. But when she told Max, Cari's son, about the text, Max said that he wasn't surprised because his mum, Cari, had actually looked at a job in Kansas. He was like, no, it's not that. Yeah. It's not that weird. So normally Nancy spoke to Cari every day, but she was only getting texts and not actual phone calls. But Nancy figured that, you know, she would see Cari soon as Cari's half-brother was getting married in a few days. So Max was going to be an usher and she had promised him that she'd definitely be at the wedding. But she didn't show up and she didn't call either. And like everybody was stunned. So Nancy, like, because they just couldn't believe that she wouldn't just not turn up. It was her half brother's wedding, you know.
Oh yeah, you think she would.
She promised she'd be there, and anyway, so Nancy decided to report her missing. She hadn't spoken to her, and she hadn't shown up for her brother's wedding, so there was definitely something wrong. So Nancy called the sheriff's office, and an officer came out, and they took all the details. She mentioned that Cari was bipolar, and the officer was like, "Oh well, if she stopped taking her meds, that can lead to erratic behaviour." Which must have been really frustrating to Nancy because there was no reason to believe that Cari had came off her meds.
Yeah.
That was just this guy assuming.
Yeah, so if she had mentioned that, would they have just like been taking it more seriously?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but there was nothing to say she was off her meds.
No.
You know.
And again, it always boils down to the family know that their loved one's the best. So
exactly.
if it's out of character, and they're, you know, they went missing, then they know.
But the police just didn't seem to take it too seriously. You know, she was a grown woman. She was still communicating with people through text. So they just weren't too concerned at all. Meanwhile, Dave was still receiving texts from Cari calling him names, saying she hated him, telling him what a bad person he was.
They've only known each other a couple of weeks.
And she also started texting and emailing Liz, who Dave was still seeing Liz on and off.
Yeah.
And Liz just couldn't understand how this woman, who she had just walked past that once, had managed to get her phone number, her email address, and she was messaging her and
I was just going to say
texting her all these bad things. On the 23rd of November 2012, Liz arrived home from work to find that her garage had been vandalised.
Right.
Someone had written whore, I can't say that word, the W-H-O-R-E word,
Yes.
whore. She had written whore.
You don't have to say that.
You say it.
Whore.
Whore.
I don't know.
I can't say it properly.
You whore.
So somebody had written that.
Yeah, okay. We got it.
Well, it had actually written whore from Dave
Oh, okay.
on the inside of the door in spray paint, so actually inside the garage.
Right, okay.
So she called the police and filed a report. She told them that she thought it was Cari and that the link between them was Dave. So the police paid him a visit. They assumed that he was the last person to see Cari, and they were kind of being a bit accusatory, like, you know, you're the last person to see her, like. So he panicked, thinking, like, do they think that I've done something to her? So he explained, like, that she'd been harassing him, and she showed them her messages, and they were just like, okay, we've seen this kind of thing before, and then just left.
Right, okay.
So they're just not taking it seriously at all.
They don't sound like that.
So Cari was still texting her family, and when her mum, and when her mum Nancy got a text, like, Nancy would say, can you phone me, like, because she wanted to just hear her voice, but she wouldn't call. She just kept texting.
Right.
Cari was also texting her son Max, telling him that she'd be coming to get him soon because they were moving to Kansas.
Right.
And, like, he was nervous about it because he didn't want to move there, but
No.
you know.
Plus, especially if she's been a bit erratic and not been around and stuff, it does seem like I'd be
Yeah.
a bit nervous as well.
So, as well as missing her brother's wedding, Cari also missed other family events, like she missed Thanksgiving, Christmas, her son's 15th birthday.
Christmas. She missed Christmas and Thanksgiving, Jesus.
And Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving's a big thing in America, isn't it?
That's right.
And her son's birthday,
Yeah.
her own birthday, and even her dad's funeral.
See, there's definitely something not right
There's
here.
something not right. Like, I mean, come on. Like, if not anything else, your dad's funeral, surely.
Well, just anything. I mean, especially if you're communicating.
Well, yeah, exactly.
In inverted commas, communicating.
So, of course, this just sort of convinced the family even more, like, something is wrong.
Totally.
Cari texted her mum Nancy and said, I'm sorry for missing the funeral. And Nancy had replied by saying, well, the only way I'll know this is you, like, call me so I can hear your voice. And Cari didn't call. So the weather had gotten colder, and Nancy went to Cari's house, and I'm assuming just to check up, make sure everything's okay,
Yeah.
pick up mail, whatever. And she saw that Cari's winter coat was there, and that's when she sort of realised, you know, Cari hasn't got any winter clothes with her. So her mind just went into turmoil, thinking, where is she? Like, is she warm enough? Is she eating? Like,
What the hell's happened?
what is she doing? And her friend said it was terrifying not knowing where she was. I mean, they did think, okay, maybe she did come off her meds, because I think she had done in the past. You know, maybe she thought she didn't need them, and, you know, this was the erratic behaviour.
It seems very erratic.
Yeah, and the text to her mum got nasty as well, saying things like Nancy wasn't a good mum, that she was controlling, and just other stuff that you wouldn't say to your mum. If you have a good relationship with your mum, you just wouldn't say that sort of stuff.
No, definitely not.
So as the winter went on, her family were afraid for her, wondering what had happened. Like, had she stopped taking her meds? And is that why she was behaving like that? But Dave was actually afraid for himself. Cari was still messaging him. Sometimes he would receive more than 60 texts a day, and sometimes about 100 emails a day.
Bloody hell.
He kept changing his phone number, but somehow she would find out his number. Because while I'm reading this, I'm like, change your number, mate. But he did. And she, like...
How do you then, like, how would she find that out?
Well,
over and over again?
I don't know, it just kept continuing. And she would keep mentioning Liz. So Dave thought that she was jealous, which was strange, because him and Liz, they still went in a relationship that between them it was still just casual.
Yeah.
But Cari would message things like, she has nothing, she's a fat cow, she looks like
but
she...
they had only crossed paths.
Yeah, exactly. She looks like she lost her puppy. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe she had a sad look on her face or something. Maybe she'll do us all a favour and kill herself, LOL.
It's a bit extreme.
Mm-hmm. And she emailed Liz saying, if you don't keep your hands and lips off my man, I will hurt you.
But he's not her man. Like...
One night, Dave was in his apartment watching TV and he got a text from Cari saying, I see you. You're sitting in your chair with your feet propped up wearing a blue shirt. So she was obviously watching him.
Oh God, that's a bit scary.
And one message that she sent to him said, my favourite thing to do is stand outside your window and stare at you.
Oh no,
that's freaky, isn't it?
I would actually hate that. Like sometimes when I'm in in the house at night time, I'm looking out the window and I always like I can imagine what if somebody's like in my garden and like.
I don't look out the window in the dark.
Do you not?
No, one year, this is totally off topic, but I'm seriously talking years ago, like when I was quite small, and I was watching Only Fools and Horses, and I think they went on a wee break somewhere, a wee holiday, and it was raining, there was a thunderstorm, and one of them looked out a window, and then there was just this face at the window. I do not look out the window at night time.
Fair enough.
And my curtains are shut, I do not look out in the dark. No, I do not look out the window. Anyway.
Probably a sensible idea.
So one night in January, so that's about 2 months after this all started, Dave got home from work and he saw Cari's car in the car park. So he's like, oh, she's here. So he took a photo of the registration plate, to prove that it was her car. He sent it to the police to show that she was stalking him. But Cari, however, was nowhere to be seen. So police in Iowa, so that's where Cari was from, were looking for her as a missing person, but police in Nebraska, where Dave was from, were looking for her with regards to stalking. Right. So as I said, there's 2 investigations and they're looking at her for different things.
Yeah.
Police searched Cari's car and they found no fingerprints on the actual car, but they found one fingerprint on a pack of mints. But when they tested the print, it didn't match Cari and it didn't match anyone else in the FBI's national database either. About 5 months after this all started, Nancy got a phone call, Cari's mum, and it was from a guy at a homeless shelter saying that Cari was there and she wanted her mum to go and pick her up. Okay. So either she called the police or the shelter called them, but anyway, she arranged to meet the police there at the shelter. Yeah. The officers told Nancy to wait in the car while they went inside, but they came back out a few minutes later shaking their heads saying that Cari wasn't there after all. Right. So that was a bit weird. Strange. I don't think anything really came of that, but obviously it's part of the story. So, yes, so then Cari's friend Amber got a message from Cari which said, hey, I made a really big mistake and I took off for a while, but I'm ready to come home now. And Amber's like, right, okay, fine, let's get you home. But throughout the conversation, Amber couldn't get Cari to agree to meet her anywhere. She's like, trying to arrange.
Yeah.
And she was just not committing to anything. So Cari's son, Max, he sent Cari a message on Facebook and he just said hi, and she replied straight away and said, hey little man, how are you? He replied, I have 3 questions. 1, what is my middle name? 2, what was our first boxer's name, as in dog? And 3, who was my best friend as a little kid? Because obviously he's like,
I don't know if it's her.
Nah, she never replied.
So it's no...
Dodgy kettles. Dodgy kettles. So I've not seen that for years. Dodgy kettles. Cari later put up a Facebook status saying that she had answered enough questions to prove herself. She said she wasn't missing, she just didn't want to come home right now.
Okay.
So meanwhile, the stalking of Dave and Liz had been escalating. As the months went on, Dave had received thousands of texts and emails threatening him. The messages said things like, I hate you so much, I want to drive a knife through your heart, hey loser, so am I ruining your life yet? And Dave and Liz referred to her as Crazy Cari. That was like their nickname for her. And the stalking actually brought them closer together. Right. So they actually started a relationship. They were a couple. Because obviously they had been on and off before. Yeah. They were back on now.
Right, okay.
So they would just be sitting like chilling, watching TV or whatever, and Cari would be messaging both of them, saying things like, Dave, if you like Liz at all, stop talking to her. and like, Liz, you're a worthless whore. Sorry, can't say that word. And she would like be blowing up their phones, like with horrible texts and emails all along the same lines. So they're just sitting watching TV and both their phones are going off with all these messages.
Who does that?
Crazy Cari.
Well, is it though?
So one day, Dave got an email with a picture attached. The picture was of what looked like Liz tied up in the trunk of a car. And it said, I have Liz tied up in the trunk of a car. You need to call her right now and tell her you hate her and she's a whore. Otherwise, I'm going to kill her. So Dave called Liz, obviously, and she answered. And he said, you're not tied up in the trunk of a car, are you? And she's like, of course not. And like they just kind of laughed it off because they were just, by this point they were that used to this sort of thing that they were just
anything seriously.
This is just another day. So they just weren't shocked by it anymore.
Yeah. One
time, Cari even sent Dave a link to an obituary for Liz. So she'd actually wrote an obituary, and in this obituary it said, I didn't know Liz very well except that she was a whore and a man stealer. Thank God she is gone.
Really?
So.
That's a true story.
True crime podcast.
It just sounds absolutely ridiculous.
So in August 2013, 9 months after this all began, Dave got a call from Liz. She was freaking out, screaming that her house was on fire, like somebody's burned my house down.
Right.
So Dave rushed over, and there were like fire engines all up and down the street, and the fire service were trying to put the fire out. Luckily, Liz's children hadn't been at home. But unfortunately her pets were. So she had 2 dogs, a cat and a snake, and they all died in the fire. So there was an audio recording of the officer at the scene talking to Liz about the fire, so that I listened to it, so I'm going to tell you what was said. So, officer, from what I've seen so far, looking inside, it looks pretty obvious this is an intentionally set fire. And Liz said, the guy that I'm seeing, he has a girlfriend that he dated for 2 weeks and she's been stalking me since November. And officer said, do you know her name? And Liz said, it's Cari, Cari. She has made threats towards me and my kids. She kept texting me and telling me she wanted to kill me and my kids. You would think they were married as much as she's stalking me. She won't leave me alone. She will not go away. I just wish she would go away. So 2 months later, Dave's workplace was vandalised with a message for everyone to see. Dave beats women was written in fluorescent orange spray paint. Like outside of his work. So Dave became a nervous wreck. Like he actually went and bought himself a gun because he was just on edge. He was like really, he was scared. So on the 1 year anniversary of their first date, so this has been going on for a year now. Jesus. Cari sent Dave an email and it was addressed to my husband. It included a photo of a knife and it said,
Cari's a bit cray-cray.
Cray-cray banana.
Yeah.
It included a photo of a knife and it said that she'd been creeping around in his building, so you can imagine how freaked out he must have been.
Totally.
Now, although Liz and Dave had been dating for about a year, or over a year, like on and off, it still wasn't that serious. They actually both wanted to see other people and they were both fine with that. So Dave was still on dating sites and talking to other women on Facebook. And there was one woman that, like, he'd never even met. He chatted to her for like 5 minutes on Facebook, but that's all it took for her to become a target. So Cari threatened to kill her and her children.
How does she? Oh, was it public on Facebook then? I mean,
it must have been, yeah. I mean, like, unless she had passwords, but surely he would have changed his passwords and things. So she seemed to be monitoring his every move and keeping a close eye on his female friends. In January 2014. One of Dave's friends, she was called Heather, so she went to visit him. So she lived a couple of hours away and they'd known each other from high school. So they'd always had a special connection and they'd always been more than just friends. I'm assuming while they had his 12-year relationship, then that probably wasn't the case. But obviously now when they visit each other or whatever, then it's more than just friends.
Like a friends with benefits.
Yeah. So they were in Dave's living room. They were just chatting and catching up, and within a couple of hours, like, his phone was blowing up with messages from Cari, because obviously if she's watching him, she can see that this woman's here, and because she doesn't know him, then she wouldn't know who this Heather was.
No.
So she said that she'd saw Heather enter in Dave's apartment, and she could see him with that whore in the living room. I wish that word would stop coming up. Americans use that word a lot.
They do.
I don't use that word at all because I can't say it.
Well, I don't use it ever.
No, exactly. So she was obviously watching because she could see them. A few hours later, Dave and Heather were in bed and they heard what sounded like a gunshot, but it was actually a brick being thrown through the bathroom window. So they called the police, and after the police came out and took a statement, Dave told Heather to get in the car and go with him to check on Liz, because obviously Cari had been threatening her as well. So he was like, "Oh shit, I want to go and check on her," but Liz was fine; she was okay. So remember, Dave had been in a relationship for 12 years before this. Well, his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his kids, Amy, she was also being harassed.
Oh.
So she was getting messages like, "You're Dave's whore," "dumbass bitch," and other threatening messages. So police were looking for Cari, but there was just no sign of her.
Jesus. I'm hoping we're going to find out here. You're leaving a bit of suspense.
Maybe. Still got a while to go. In spring 2015, 2.5 years after this all began, detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty, who worked at the Potawatomi, I don't know if I pronounced that right, Potawatomi County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, decided to take on the case. They hadn't been working on it before, but they were both aware of it, and it just intrigued them because they're like, "Who the hell is this woman? Like, what's going on?
Where is she?"
So they decided to work it from a different angle. So Jim was going to work it like Cari was dead and it was somebody else, impersonating her. And Ryan was going to work it like she was alive.
Right, okay.
So this,
just to be fair, either could be feasible.
Well, yeah, exactly. So one of them was going to do everything they could to prove she was still alive and doing all this stalking, and the other one was going to do everything they could to prove that she was dead and someone else was doing the stalking. So Cari's bank account hadn't been touched, so obviously it's not normal.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Like a bank account, yeah.
Obviously that's not normal for people just to vanish and spend no money.
Yeah.
No one had heard her voice or actually seen her. So
you would come to the conclusion that there's a good possibility that she's not alive.
It is possible, of course, that she'd been planning to disappear and had saved cash or had someone helping her.
Yeah.
But the messages that she was sending just didn't seem to be written by her either. Like, they were filled with spelling mistakes and, like, maybe, like, the grammar wasn't, like, what she would do. And, they just weren't written like Cari would write them. I mean, like, when you text somebody a lot, you get to know their style, don't you?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, like, one of my friends, sometimes if she maybe went for a sleep or she wasn't around, her boyfriend would pick up her phone if I'd text and he would answer me.
Yeah.
But I would know straight away whether it was him or whether it was her, because you can just tell the style.
Yeah.
So, unlike officers before them, these detectives didn't believe Cari being bipolar had anything to do with why she went missing. So at least these are like sensible officers here, because like just because somebody has a medical condition and mental condition, whatever, you don't. That's not necessarily the reason why they do things.
Exactly. They could be managing that just fine, and
exactly.
Something else has obviously happened.
So luckily, these officers they said, how many people in the world are diagnosed with bipolar and they don't just go missing for no reason, whether they take their meds or not?
Exactly.
So
there's more to it than that.
So they weren't treating it as, that this woman is just bipolar and that's it. That's kind of what the other officers were treating it like.
Even if that was the case, I mean, surely you still want to do everything you can to find her because she needs help.
Exactly, yeah.
Regardless if that's what the cause was.
You're very sensible, do you know that?
I know.
Sometimes.
Not just a pretty face.
Sometimes. So, yeah, and these officers, they just couldn't see a reason for her just up and leaving, as her life had never been better. She had a good income, a nice house, her son, friends and family. She was happy. There was just no reason for her.
Yeah.
I mean, not
as extreme as that.
Not everybody knows what's going on behind closed doors and stuff, like, but she did seem to be happy. So the detective, Ryan, who was looking at the angle that Cari was alive, came to the conclusion that he just couldn't prove that she was actually alive. So this was actually a turning point in the investigation, because they were like, right, could Cari have been dead all this time?
Well, that's my thoughts at the moment. Is that somebody else?
So if she was, what happened to her after Dave left for work that morning, 2.5 years ago?
Yeah.
So this is like 2.5 years this has been going on for her. And who is this stalker if it wasn't her? So one person's name who kept jumping out at them was Liz.
Uh-huh.
She had never met Cari, she had no involvement in Cari's life, and they had just walked past each other one time, yet her name was all over the harassment reports. Like, why was Cari so obsessed with her? Like, what was it about her that...
Well, that's what I mean, they'd only just crossed paths.
There was just something about Liz. They just had a feeling, so she was definitely a person of interest.
I hadn't really thought about that until this moment.
So as these... It doesn't mean to say it's true, just because
Well,
they're thinking about her.
This is true.
So as these messages were all sent by text and email, the detectives asked a co-worker, Tony Kawa, who is a digital forensic expert, to work the case with them. He discovered that the stalker had sent Dave about 15,000 emails.
Wow.
Now, that's a lot. Over a couple of years, that's a lot of emails, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Tony said, as it didn't seem like these messages were coming from Cari, there had to be a way that he could track down the digital activity. So now, at one point, Liz had actually given her phone to the police when she had been receiving abusive messages. She'd given them permission to download all her files and review them.
Mm-hmm.
So the detectives now decided to look at her in again, because before, when they'd looked at their phone, they'd been looking at her as a victim.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably would have missed a lot of stuff because
they weren't looking for it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
which could make sense how every time he changed his phone number, he was still getting messages because he would have given her the phone number.
Detective Laura's on the case.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things they had found was a photo of Cari's car, and that had been taken about a month before police had recovered it.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow she knew where Cari's car was when it was apparently missing.
Right.
Another thing they found was 6 calls made to Cari's house. She had withheld her number by putting *67 and then dialed the number. I think it's like in the UK, I think we dial 141 before a number and it blocks your number.
Yeah, well, we did. I don't know if we still do, but we did.
Anyway, like, why would Liz be calling Cari when she'd only walked past her once?
Mm-hmm.
So they also found an email with the photo of the woman that was tied up and in the trunk of the car that the stalker had sent to Dave, and the data showed that it had been taken with Liz's phone.
Oh.
Basically, it was like Liz had
it's got somebody to take a photo of her, doesn't it?
No, I think she had a self-timer.
Oh.
And she's duct taped her own mouth, tied her hands and crawled in the trunk of a car and used a self-timer, because I don't think anybody else was involved.
Right, okay.
So Jim and Ryan, the detectives, they went to visit Cari's mum Nancy and told her that they believed now that she wasn't a missing person and that she didn't leave of her own accord.
Mm-hmm.
And this visit actually led them to another clue. It had come up earlier, but now that Liz was a suspect, they were obviously looking at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
So Nancy told them that right after Cari disappeared, Cari had texted her mum and told her that she had sold all of her furniture. So she wanted her mum to let the buyer into the house so that they could pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Cari also sent Nancy a picture of a cheque to prove that the buyer had paid for the furniture. Because I think her mum was kind of like, don't know about that. But anyway, the cheque was made out to Cari, and the person who wrote the cheque signed it, Shanna Goyer. Now remember, that's Liz's real name. So that's why I told you at the start what her real name was. So police also compared the fingerprint that was in Cari's car to Liz's, and it was a match. So now it was looking like Cari was dead and Liz had been impersonating her the whole time.
But then on the same token, we're saying like how Cari had only met Liz like in the hallway, didn't really know her. Isn't that the same for Liz now? She's literally just walked past her. And if she's the actual culprit here, then, you know, after a 2-second meeting or passing, she's done all this.
Cray banana.
Yeah.
So they told Dave that they suspected Liz, but he was like, nah. Like, he had never questioned that it was anyone other than Cari.
Yeah.
Like, who else could it have been?
But then how are they getting messages at the
and
same
Dave
time?
had received messages from Cari when he was with Liz, so how could it be her? Exactly what you just said.
And of course, if Liz has had them on her phone as well. Has she had some help? I need to know. Go. Just keep going.
Well, I am.
Okay.
Shut up. So meanwhile, police couldn't prove that Liz murdered Cari, so there still wasn't enough for an arrest. So in December 2015, Liz walked into the police station. Ryan, the detective, saw her talking with another officer, and he heard her mention something about a harassment report. So when Liz left, Ryan decided to go and pay her a visit at home. He told her that he was an investigator because she hadn't met him.
Right.
So he told her that he was an investigator at the sheriff's office and that he'd heard that she'd popped in.
Mm-hmm.
He said he didn't have he says, I've not got a heavy caseload at the now, so I'll be more than happy to help with whatever report that you tried to file.
Yeah.
So she told him that she had previously filed reports against Cari Farver, and he played dumb. Mm-hmm. He wanted her to think that he had an idea, that he had no idea what she was talking about, just to lower her guard. Mm-hmm. She went on to say that she had now come to the realisation that it might not have been Cari that's been harassing her and Dave all along. She believed that it was Dave's ex, Amy, pretending to be Cari. Remember, Amy is the 12-year the 12-year relationship.
Yeah. So she's trying to pin the blame on somebody else now.
So she said Dave and Cari had only dated for 2 weeks, so why would she still be stalking him 3 years later? Mm-hmm. It made sense that it would be Amy, because Amy had been in a long-term relationship with him and was the mother of his children, so could be jealous of Liz, and that's why she was stalking them.
Yeah.
Because, that's what made sense.
Yeah.
So Ryan, he asked if he could do a download of her phone to extract the most recent messages, and she signed a consent form to retrieve the information. She had no idea that they would be able to access stuff that she had deleted. So she obviously thought she had nothing to hide. So she's like, yeah, no problem here.
Yeah, here you go. They're like nice ones.
So meanwhile, Dave realised that his gun was missing. Mm-hmm. He kept it in a box in a cupboard, and one day he realised the box had been moved, so he looked inside and the gun was gone. So he immediately phoned the police. Liz also mentioned the missing gun, and she had implied that Amy was the thief. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to rewind again, shall we? Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, we're actually going forward. Like, we're rewinding the start of the story that I was telling you, but we're actually going forward. Yeah. Uh-huh. So, we're going to the 5th of December 2015, and we were in Big Lake Park, remember?
Yes.
Are you sure? Because it was a while ago.
Yes, because that's when Lou got shot in the leg.
Yeah, it was about 40 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So, right. So this was 6 days after Dave's gun had been stolen. Mm-hmm. So police received a call from a woman saying that she'd been shot in the leg. This woman was Liz Gollier. She had said that she'd sat down on a bench, a woman came up behind her and shot her in the thigh. So Liz was rushed to hospital, and at first she said she didn't know who shot her, but soon changed that story to Amy shot her. So officers, right off the bat, they didn't believe that Amy had anything to do with anything.
No, I don't believe that she had either.
And they didn't believe that Amy had shot her. She had an alibi anyway. There was just no evidence pointing to anyone else being in that spot at the park that night. So in other words, Liz shot herself. It was just another way to be the victim and for her to be in Dave's life. So Tony Carver was on a mission to prove that Liz was the stalker. He had now had the recent download of Liz's phone call and all the messages that were supposedly being sent from Cari. He was spending hours of his own free time trying to decipher where those messages actually came from. He discovered that Liz signed up for upwards of 20 or 30 fake email addresses. And they all say the name Cari Farver. So at a glance, you probably wouldn't even notice the differences. You would just think it was from the real Cari. So it was maybe Cari Garver at hotmail.co.uk or Cari Farver at Gmail. You know what I mean? Yeah. So at a glance, you would just see it was from that person. You wouldn't kind of notice the proper email address. So eventually Tony traced the messages right back to Liz. He also discovered that Liz had been using an app which allowed her to send messages and receive them at a later time. So that's how her and Dave were receiving messages when they were together. Of course Dave would never have suspected her because she was getting the messages at the same time.
That's so scary to think you can do that.
Well, Tony said that this must have taken Liz 40 or 50 hours a week. That's a full-time job, exactly. Jeez. So she was obsessed.
Really?
So detective brought Liz in for an interview about 2 weeks after she was shot, and they told her that they were working on a missing persons case, that they were trying to find Cari Farver. So she obviously still doesn't know that she's a suspect.
No.
They believed to tell her that they They decided to tell her that they had found human remains and they believed they belonged to Cari. They asked if she knew of anyone who would want to hurt Cari, and Liz said she didn't know her long enough to know that. She had only passed by her once. She then tried to shift the blame onto Amy again, saying, well, they were together for 12 years. If anyone was going to be possessive of Dave, it would be Amy. So Detective Jim Doty was interviewing Liz, and he said he knew most likely that she was a murderer. But in order to solve the case, he needed her to believe that he thought, maybe Amy did do it, just to get her talking and sort of to get her relaxed. So he said, well, if Amy shot you, then maybe she did do something to Cari. So he told her that he needed her help to get Amy to confess to Cari's murder. So he said to Liz, if you get any messages from Amy that have got anything to do with Cari, let me know. So because any information that she could pass on to them, they could start building a case against Amy. So she's obviously fallen for all this. So they're hoping that Liz will tell them that Amy has been in touch and that maybe she will actually incriminate herself and possibly give up details about the murder and maybe even lead them to the body, because this would put her in the clear and get rid of Amy out of Dave's life, because she would be in prison. So this is obviously her goal, to be with Dave. So it took just days for Liz to play right into their hands. So the detectives started receiving messages from her that she claimed were from Amy. So one of them was Amy was confessing to shooting Liz at Big Lake Park. Funnily enough, she just confessed.
Of course, yeah.
The email said, I shot you, Liz, to make sure Dave stayed away from you. I got rid of the gun. Detective Doty called Liz and obviously told her, that's great, well done for getting that information. But, see if you could push her for a bit more info on Cari. What she did, and what she did to Cari and things like that. So that would help her case immensely.
Yeah.
Especially if it was quite specific.
Yeah.
So she's obviously fallen for this. A few days later, Liz forwarded a new email, apparently from Amy, and this one had details about Cari's murder.
Funny that. So
parts of it said, when I met Crazy Cari, she would not stop talking about Dave and him being her husband. She tried to attack me, but I attacked her with a knife. I stabbed her 3 or 4 times in the chest and stomach area, and then took her out and burned her. I stuffed her body in a garbage can with crap.
Lovely.
So now the detectives decided to push Liz even more and use her obsession with Dave against her. Liz's worst nightmare was Dave getting back together with Amy. So in Ryan Avis's words, he said, quote, so we decided that maybe we could nudge Dave Krouper into moving in with Amy, end quote. So that would sort of send Liz. So shortly after that happened, because Dave was like, okay, they got a phone call from Liz. She was crying and she was so upset that Amy wasn't in prison yet.
Right.
She said, quote, looks like the only person that benefited was her. So she gets to shoot somebody, and then she gets to kill another person, and then she gets to move in with Dave, and she gets to be free. And you guys aren't arresting her, end quote. Sounds like a kid, eh?
Yeah, I know,
I want him,
Yes, I know. Spelt brat.
Yeah, that's what she sounds like. So she asked why the email from Amy confessing to Cari's murder wasn't enough evidence to get her arrested. And she said, quote, it's very graphic what she did to her, and she's still not arrested, end quote. The detective replied, well, I'm trying to build a case. It's very difficult. We need more information. We need things that only the killer would know. So within days, surprise, surprise, more Amy confessions appeared. One said, I really did kill Cari, and I did do it in our own car. So they went back to the car to see if it was a crime scene. Because before, when they looked at it, they'd only searched for it and looked for fingerprints. They hadn't actually been looking at it as a crime scene.
Yeah.
So they peeled off the fabric off the passenger seat and found a big red stain in the bottom of the seat. So obviously it tested positive for human blood. So at last it looked like they found the crime scene. So the blood was a match for Cari's DNA, so this was no longer a missing persons investigation, it was a murder investigation. So Omaha police were now brought into the case since that's where the murder likely happened. Detective Dave Schneider is a cold case detective and wanted to talk to Liz. She had a warrant for an unpaid traffic citation, so that gave him an excuse to actually be able to arrest her and bring her in. So as soon as she was sat in the chair, though, he told her exactly why he wanted to talk to her. Cari Farver. He said to Liz, Cari's phone was at your house right after she disappeared, and she said she's never been to my house. And he said your fingerprints were inside her vehicle, and she said she didn't know because she had never been in Cari's car. She said that she had never been around Cari's car, she had never driven it, she'd never even seen it. And he said for years people have been sending emails under Cari's fictitious accounts and the IP addresses show up to your house. And she replied that she didn't have internet at her house.
Right, okay.
Because that's not easy to check, is it?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure they'd find that one out.
So Liz just thought that she was smarter than the police, and she had attitude. And she just denied everything. And it was like she was just like a teenager who was in trouble with her parents. That's how she kind of came across.
Yeah.
The detective told her that he knew that she wrote the so-called Amy confession emails, and again she denied it. In an interview, he actually said, quote, Liz is the type of person where it could be 2:00 in the afternoon and you could tell her, Liz, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and she would say, no it's not, it's midnight.
Okay.
And I actually thought, you know what, that actually sums up exactly what a teenager in trouble is like. You know, they're deny.
Yeah, they know better.
So while she was being interviewed, detectives Jim and Ryan had gotten a search warrant and went to search Liz's apartment. They found Cari's digital camera and Cari's camcorder. So that means that at some point, Liz went into Cari's house and stole those items. Mm-hmm. Because she didn't have them with her.
Well, I'm assuming is that not when she went to pick up the furniture?
Oh yeah, aye, probably. Mm-hmm. So Liz was arrested. The prosecution said this case was bizarre to the point where it would have taken some convincing to make somebody believe that it actually happened. You know, prime example, you said to me a little while ago, is this a real story? Like, is this true crime? Uh-huh. And it's pretty unbelievable if you think about it, that someone would let their pets die in a fire that they started. Do you remember that? Yeah, because when I was researching, I thought, well, it can't be, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. You think
her pets have died, so... and also she shot herself as well, you know, so you're...
Crazy. And tied herself up in a car to make a living.
Yeah. So obviously that's going to take quite a lot of convincing a jury to sort of... So her defence attorney saw huge flaws in the case against Liz. There was no body, there was no murder weapon, there was no proof that she even died, that Cari had even died. So they waived the jury trial and moved it up hopefully before they found a body, because obviously it would be a lot easier to defend someone without a body. So that's her defence. They're like, right, we'll try and get this moving along so before they find a body. Yeah. But a few months before the trial, Ryan and Jim, the detectives, paid Dave a visit, and they were about to leave, and they were like, are you sure there's nothing that we've missed before? Mm-hmm. And Dave suddenly remembered he had a tablet that had been in storage for the past couple of years. Like, obviously before he just hadn't thought about it. It had been, you know, as I said, it had been in storage and he didn't think it'd be any help, but it just kind of came, all of a sudden it came to his mind. So he obviously got it and handed it in. So Tony, the digital expert, examined the tablet, and it had a micro SD card in it, and that memory card looked blank. So if you plugged it into your computer, it would just look like there was nothing there. Mm-hmm. Nothing to see here. Yeah. But of course there was deleted information on it, which he retrieved. Uh-huh. So that SD card had actually been in Liz's phone, and it had thousands and thousands of deleted images that she thought were gone forever. Uh-huh. But of course Tony was able to retrieve them. He came across a photo, and he wasn't sure what it was at first. It was like reddish, and it took him a minute to realise he was actually looking at a human foot. Oh. So this foot was decomposing, so obviously it was... that foot was not alive. Mm-hmm. And this human foot had a tattoo on it. Mm-hmm. Cari had a tattoo on her foot, which was a Chinese symbol meaning mother. Right. And here it was in a photo from Liz's memory card. Yeah. So...
if that's not guilty then, well, exactly. What is.
So, in 2017, Liz was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. She's still claiming that the real killer is still out there, and she has said that she won't stop fighting until she's set free and that they find the right person. And unfortunately, Cari's body still hasn't been found.
Oh dear.
So
that's awful.
That's
Crazy.
That was a bizarre one.
It was, wasn't
I
it?
really hope they find her body at some point. But obviously she's still acting like a teenager and still denying it. And it's like, come on. Especially with the photo on her that had been,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think she does sound very guilty to me, so.
Yeah, I think so. And just tell them
But
where her body
like,
is.
I never initially thought that. Like, when you said that, obviously, I thought Liz was actually quite innocent to start with, and then...
No, I think she's guilty as hell.
Yes, I think she definitely is.
So thank you to everybody for listening. It's good to be back.
It is.
And if you'd like to join our Patreon, then it's patreon.com/CrimeDivers, and you can get some bonus episodes and whatnot. If you want to follow us on social media or email us, then the information is in the show notes.
And if you haven't already, which hopefully you have, but please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.